When you look at the raw figures, there are relatively few murders here in Australia, but many of them still remain unsolved. Every year, close to 300 people are murdered across Australia.
A search party discovered her yesterday.
Police certain they are those of a teenage or young woman.
It was an horrific crime that got a lot of mass media coverage at the time, but it was never solved.
Sometimes the details of the cases are so brutal they transfix a nation.
Raped and bashed so viciously her skull was crushed.
Senseless acts against mothers, fathers, brothers and sisters, too violent to believe.
I want my son back. He's a beautiful boy, he wouldn't harm a fly.
Some cases are so puzzling it's impossible to even identify the victim.
A quiet street turned crime scene as police arrived en masse, made harder because the body is without identification.
Then there are the cold cases, the mystery of the murderer lying dormant for decades.
We want to know why he was killed, where he was killed, when he was killed.
With millions of dollars of rewards on the line, why do these murders remain unsolved?
The problem is for us is we know that there are people out there who have information who, if they came forward, they would change our lives.
Joining us now is Justine Ford, the author of a new book, Unsolved Australia. Good morning to you. You've looked at some baffling and shocking cases. One of them that stands out is the case of 20-year-old Penny Hill.
Good morning, Cam. Yes, the case of Penny Hill is absolutely terrible. She moved to Coolah in country New South Wales in 1991, where she was going to work as a nanny at a local motel for the owners there. One night she just spoke to her boyfriend on the phone from the motel's reception area, and then after that we believe that she turned in for the evening. But the day after that, the very morning after that, she was found slumped against a paddock gate with massive head injuries, and she died 2 weeks after that. Now, unfortunately, police at the time weren't able to solve the case, but Unsolved homicide team investigators who are looking at the case, or have been more recently, believe that with just one more piece of information, this is a case they might be able to crack.
All right, which brings us to the use of rewards as, you know, as an incentive for people to come forward and give information that isn't known at the moment. Do they tend to work?
Rewards aren't often paid. Here in Victoria, for example, only one $1 million reward has been paid out, and that was over the murder of Mersina Halvargas. But having said that, rewards are often confidential information, which means that they're not often public knowledge. And I think the most important thing to note about rewards is that they focus public attention back on these very important cases.
Yeah, exactly, which I guess the headline about some of the size of these rewards serves its own purpose of bringing information to the spotlight. But what are some of the biggest rewards that are out there at the moment?
Well, in Victoria, every new reward for a homicide is set at $1 million. And last month, the Victorian government announced 8 $1 million rewards for cold cases as well. And I think South Australia led the charge, though, because last year, excuse me, they announced 13 $1 million rewards, or up to $1 million, in cases of child murders. And one very famous case that is one of those rewards is the disappearance of the Beaumont children. Right, OK.
The details of that really did shock Australia. I know that my mother talks about that case as if it was, you know, the loss of Australia's innocence, that particular case.
I think it was the loss of Australia's innocence, and I think any of those crimes that happened, you know, back in the 60s, that was 1966, I think it came as an enormous shock to Australia. We just were not used to that kind of thing at all.
What about the disappearance of Daniel Sheppard, Justine? It shares a lot of similarities with the case of Daniel Morcombe.
That's right. The Daniel Sheppard case, this is another terrible case. Now, it's entirely unrelated to the Daniel Morcombe case, of course, but they were both Daniels. They were both teenagers. They both had twin brothers, and they were both abducted from public places. Now, Daniel Sheppard went out 20 years ago on New Year's Eve with his twin brother and some mates. The group separated, and Daniel was last seen walking down the ramp at the Port Adelaide train station. It was only a 10-minute 30-minute walk home, but he never made it. Police searched extensively for him and weren't able to find him and concluded that he'd been abducted and murdered. Now, once again, cold case investigators are looking at this case and believe that with one piece of information, they may be able to solve this one too.
You know, these cases come to public light and they certainly affect the psyche of the nation. It must have a very profound effect on the people who are actually doing the investigations at the time, and to have to sort of leave an investigation unsolved must be terribly traumatic for those people.
Well, it is, and it never leaves them, because in many cases they know that the answer's in the file. They might have an idea of who committed those crimes, but they just don't have that one piece of information that gets the investigation over the edge.
All right, Justine, great to talk to you this morning. Thank you very much for that. Justine
Thanks,
Ford
Cam.
there, Deb.